Welcome to the Conscious Marketer Podcast, the place for conscious entrepreneurs, teachers, healers, and authors who want to expand their reach and impact in the world. Join us and meet leading experts where we talk all things conscious marketing, launches, storytelling, and other strategies to help you serve more people. Find us at consciousmarketer.com. Welcome to the show. Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Richard Tobinger, the CEO of Conscious Marketer, and I'm here with Kylie Slavik, Director of Storytelling and Brand Development. Hi, Kylie.
Hey.
And we are super excited to have on truly one of the titans in copywriting, direct marketing, Brian Kurtz. He's been in this world for over 40 years. And he's also the author of Overdeliver, Build a Business for a Lifetime, Playing the Long Game in Direct Response Marketing. And I've really been looking forward to this call today. Before we get going, if you don't know Brian, let me just give you a few tidbits so that you know who we have on our podcast today. He's an expert in multi-channel direct response marketing, both offline and online. He's had two careers. The first spanned 34 years as a force behind Boardroom Inc., an iconic publisher and direct marketer. Boardroom sent billions of pieces of direct mail over the years. His second career...
I didn't lick every stamp.
Right. You didn't lick every stamp. Let's hope not. Thanks, Brian. His second career is he's the founder of Titans Marketing, and it's a direct marketing, educational, and coaching company where he has continued working with the best of the best. And he runs a couple mastermind groups. We'll talk about those later. And without further ado, why don't we just jump right in to the discussion, Brian? And what we normally do is just ask, can you give us kind of an abbreviated origin story? Can you let us know kind of how you got to this point in your life and, like the Cliff Notes versions with a few details that are salient?
The fact that it's called Conscious Marketer and that I'm conscious right now is actually makes me qualified for this podcast in a big way. And I say that a little tongue in cheek only because, I've been through some major health scares and I'm really healthy, but you can be the healthiest person in the world.
Right.
And so I had a major stroke in 2019, which I'm proud to be here because I'm conscious.
Right.
It's like a really important thing. And, what was interesting at that period, I'll go there and I'll do a flashback to my origin story. But, I think it's important for me to realize that what I did up until my stroke was actually the same thing that I did after my stroke. So what happened was, when you have a near-death experience, sometimes you say, you have a come to Jesus moment and you say, this is it, right? I got to really live my life.
Right.
And the beauty of it is that not that my life is perfect, but I realized that my mission for what I do and what I want to do and what I like to do was the same, both, pre-near-death experience and post-near-death experience, which in itself was an enlightening thing to happen to me.
Right.
And, because most people, I guess I'm a little more aware of my vulnerability and how capricious life is. One AFib to a blood clot to death could have been me. That's the part that really got to me, that it was just like so quick and random. But on the other side of that, it's like I realized I used to say it before, and I always said that I want to be, I'm in a position because I've been in the business for 40 years, because I was there in the horse and buggy days, pre-internet, and I paid attention
right.
with the advent of the internet, whereas most of the people I grew up with in the direct marketing world in the 80s and 90s, when there was no internet, it was mostly direct mail, a lot of those people did not make a transition to online. Not that I'm an online expert at all, but I became a student of online. I think I met you through Jeff Walker. And I was in Jeff Walker's mastermind. I wasn't doing launches, but Jeff Walker let me into his high-end mastermind because they thought I knew something of yesteryear. Like chapter 3 of my book, Overdeliver, is how paying postage made me a better marketer.
Right.
And I can talk about that because it's true. It's not that everybody should do direct mail. It's that when you had to pay for postage and printing and put a stamp on it, you had to be much more precise in what you were doing than when you're sending out an email, which is cheap and a little more random. But getting into that room, getting into Jeff Walker's room was easier than I thought. I had a golden ticket because of my experience. I didn't belong there, but by being there, then I get the education of all the people he has in his group are like the best online marketers around. And so that kind of stuff, and that's what I realized, that's what my life's about. It's to be a teacher and a student. It's always to be a teacher and a student. And the other piece of that is that Jay Abraham, one of my mentors, always says, if you've done it, you have an obligation to teach it. He used to say you have a moral obligation to teach it. And so whether people want to listen to me or not, that's another story. And the ones who want to listen to me, I'll gladly talk till their ears fall off. However, it is about teaching what I've learned, teaching what I've done. And I also say it's not bragging if you did it either. So to say that I've sold $2 billion worth of merchandise in my career is not a brag. It's just, I did it. So, but what were the aspects of doing it? And what did I learn doing it? And what are the lessons that I can impart on people, both good and bad, through that experience? And that's kind of what my life's been about. And I also see myself as a bridge that connects the eternal truths of direct marketing, of my origins, to everything that's state of the art today. And I have a unique perspective that we all have unique perspectives because we're all unique. But my unique perspective is that journey. And the journey started in a very random way. Obviously, like a lot of people, I fell into the business. I was an English major in college. I said, I want to be a writer. I thought I'd be a film critic. I was like, either that or a baseball umpire. I couldn't decide which, or an English professor. And so when I went looking for jobs, I just looked for publishing companies, figuring I'll be a writer. And the second job I got was at Boardroom, but the job wasn't for writing. It was for list management. Boardroom was a newsletter publisher with the most responsive mailing lists that you could ever imagine, because it wasn't a magazine, it was a newsletter, meaning that there was no advertising. Book buyer and subscriber lists were affluent executives who bought through direct mail. And the best people to buy from direct mail companies are people who bought from direct mail before, obviously. So I had this amazing list, and the job I fell into was being the list manager at Boardroom. So I was basically renting the Boardroom list because we didn't have advertising. So the only way to reach our incredible audience was through our list in direct mail. So I was selling our lists or renting them to everybody in the industry, from magazines like Money Magazine and the Wall Street Journal, to catalogs like the Sharper Image and Brookstone and all those people, and then to fundraisers and paralyzed American veterans. And I was selling it to everybody and anybody that would need an affluent executive that would buy through the mail. And that positioned me two ways. One, for my entire career, it positioned me to understand marketing from the audience perspective. And it's made me, I always say I was just a list guy, right? But being a list guy is powerful because I understood the market. Because I always say the creative is the least important thing until it's not. Well, that's because the list and the audience is the most important. And so you have to really hone that list. You have to hone that audience before you're going to do any kind of significant marketing. So that was one reason why going from a list manager was a great perspective. And also it gave me a perspective that very few people had at the time, because most people were either renting lists and they were, circulation folks who were just spreadsheet jockeys and, doing the numbers, which is important, of course. But I was really looking to understand the psychology of the buyer. Always the psychology of the buyer. And that got me in. And at Boardroom, we work with the best copywriters who've ever lived. We work with and again, I'm not bragging. This is what I did for 34 years. So we work with Gene Schwartz, who's like the most prolific copywriter, one of the most prolific copywriters who've ever lived, wrote Breakthrough Advertising, the most important book on copywriting and marketing and human behavior, which I now have the rights to, that I sell. That's not the most important. The most important thing is he was a mentor of mine. And he taught me so much about what it meant to really understand that the desire as a copywriter or as a marketer, you don't create desire. The desire is already out there.
Yep.
You have to hone it. You have to bring it up. You have to bring it out and find it and bring it out in the marketplace. It's not just going to land in your lap,
Right.
and it's not just, out there. So that was my upbringing, was in the list management and then into the marketing at Boardroom. But the beauty was that it was a candy store, an amusement park, nirvana, marketing nirvana. It was calling it a candy store would be an understatement. I had so many great products to market. I had access to the best copywriters, consultants. I mean, I worked with people on this call may not even remember, people like Dick Benson, who's one of the best direct mail consultants of all time, Gordon Grossman, who built the Reader's Digest and who taught me regression modeling and taught me, not from a statistics standpoint, but from a marketing standpoint. And the education that I got by working with the best of the best for 34 years was a PhD in direct marketing. Now, then taking that to, online and launches and everything that's great about online marketing, which is basically just was a huge gift to me to be able to make those transitions. But it was all based on my education and my early days working with the best of the best, legends, all legends.
So, Brian, you had this amazing kind of the evolution of the direct mail industry. And just to clarify for people, it wasn't like advertising where you just buy billboard space or run ads. You would have to buy postage and actually spend money to mail things. So the types of promotions you did had to make money, or you would take a bath. Is that right?
Yes. I write about this a lot in Overdeliver because it's the discipline of direct mail that is the reason why paying postage made me a better marketer.
Right.
Not because I did direct mail, but because we had to make every promotion pay out. Everything we did had to compensate for postage and printing and lengthy sales letters with the most talented copywriters. And we had a product, a newsletter and books that were not readily known either. Right. They weren't like household names. So you had to tell a long story. We were talking before we came on the podcast with Kylie about, the idea of being a storyteller is being a great copywriter.
Right.
And she's a great storyteller, which makes her a great copywriter. But you have to tell a story. You can't do like double postcards in direct mail for a newsletter that no one's ever heard of. You can do a double postcard from Money Magazine or the Wall Street Journal because everybody knows what it is. You can give away a free issue, and you can do that on a double postcard because they know what it is.
Right.
So the extravagant nature of the mailings as well, not just paying postage and printing, but paying higher postage and paying for more printing of more pages,
right?
12-page letters, 16-page letters, 16-page magalogs, 64-page bookalogs, these mailers that were these thick, almost like, little mini books, little digest books that were the promotion.
Right.
And so you had to make that pay out. And that's why I think the people who came out of the direct mail world into the online world, and there weren't a lot of us, a lot of the people from the direct mail world kind of gave up.
Right.
They saw the internet and they got scared or they were intimidated by it. I was intimidated by it,
right.
But I also saw that this was the ultimate direct response medium, and you could get faster results too.
Well, it's interesting because I remember a meeting, a Jeff Walker meeting. It was in Durango. This was, I think, 2012, and Facebook only like a month or two before that had opened up the timeline to ads. I had jumped on there and started running ads.
Right.
And I remember Jeff kind of pulling me aside and saying, "Hey, will you teach a little bit about this?" And I remember thinking, well, I can show you what I know, but I really don't know very much because it just opened up like a month ago, And then
right.
Especially from 2008 to 2015, there was just so much happening. Like every 6 months, something major would change online, and new opportunities were kind of emerging and going away,
But I was able, the context that I was able to put all that in was a little different context. Is that the thing is, like, when you say that you send out a direct mail campaign and it's got to pay out and it's expensive, and then you send out an email campaign that is not expensive,
right,
and you think it doesn't have to pay out, and you still try to make it pay out, there are so many errors being made. We'll use email as an example, but anything online. Because if you send out an email that's, nondescript and doesn't doesn't connect with the audience, and you say, well, I didn't get any orders, I didn't get any response, I didn't get any engagement, but it's okay because it didn't cost me anything. And I say it cost you a lot. It didn't cost you as much as postage and printing, but it cost you a lot because you don't know when you go out the next time how many people remember how off base you were with that last promotion. And therefore, you're going to lose people just by attrition because they don't trust you anymore. You don't become a trusted deliverer of information, of content, of story, of whatever you're selling. So the beauty of email for me, and I think email is the killer app from someone who came out of direct mail, is that now, and also like what Jeff Walker teaches with launches, the idea that you can give your best stuff away up front. And people would say, well, why would I want to do that? Because, that's the stuff they'll pay the most for. Well, if you give away your best stuff up front, you have to have confidence you're going to come up with more best stuff. And that's what they'll pay for. But you gave them the good best stuff for free also. And the whole package. It's sort of like in direct mail. And I learned this in direct mail, that when you sell a book in direct mail and you sell premiums with it, like other extra little books, you sell the premiums more than the lead book. And the lead book becomes while people are buying the book, they're buying the premiums, really. We sold books by the pound. And it was just, and with a lot of credibility and a lot of integrity. But the lesson was, without getting into too much more detail on that, it's like you find a model and then you steal smart from it. Stealing's a felony. Stealing smart is an art. So, you don't want to go to jail, but you definitely want to use the model and then adapt it to what your products are, what you've got in the to offer the marketplace. And it was a great lesson.
Yeah, I remember the P90X funnel. That's a fitness product, and they had a similar kind of like back end. And I remember one of the upsells was like disc insurance. If your DVD scratched, they would like replace it. And they had all kinds of crazy stuff. But I think that campaign did like $500 million. It was
that was large. Amazing. Well, there's a lot of them, but I would say that, in today's marketing, everything in direct mail had to sell something, but you needed to do it elegantly. Today, everything is not a revenue event. Everything is a relationship event. Marketing isn't everything. It's the only thing. That's another eternal truth. But that doesn't mean you have to, price gouge people. It doesn't mean you have to sell without giving value. An eternal truth would be that you lead with value, and that's eternal. We led with value. Like when we went to like a book-a-log format in direct mail, it was a promotion for our newsletter, but inside the book-a-log, we had information that was from the book or from the newsletter. So we actually gave content inside the promotion. I actually sometimes think that our direct mail like that was a precursor for PLF and a precursor for content webinars into an offer. So you got to lead with value. That is obviously an eternal truth. You have to believe your numbers. In direct marketing, what direct marketing is, it's measurable marketing. It's accountable advertising. You have to make sure your statistician is competent, and probably a lot of people think that in an entrepreneurial organization, your most important employee is your CFO to keep the numbers right and keep your dollars in line and make sure your spending doesn't go out of whack. Your CFO is important, not as important as your director of analytics. The idea that early online marketers, they didn't understand statistical significance. Like they would have 2 tests and they'd have 11 orders and 9 orders with $100 product. And in the middle of a launch would say the 11 orders beat the 9 orders. Let's roll with the 11 orders as the control. And that's not the way to do testing, A/B testing. You've got to have discipline and you've got to have statistical significance. That's an eternal truth. You also have to do A/B testing. You have to have 2 like audiences and you have to be disciplined. One of the other rules of thumb is single variable testing. If you've got 2 tests, you want to make sure that you either test a completely different creative and everything, or if you just want to test a variation, you test one element at a time to make sure you know which element would lift the response or depress the response. And that's big with a price test, for example. You don't want to have a price test in addition to copy tests because you don't know what's going to lift response or depress response. You have to isolate it. So single variable testing is very important. Another rule of thumb an eternal truth is what I call first find out if you have a business. And what I mean by that, it sounds kind of basic, but it's very important that when you're testing a new product or service for the first time, you want to do the absolute minimum that you need to do with maximum effectiveness to determine whether you have a go or go no on your business. So in other words, a lot of marketers would say, I want to test this product and I want to test 18 variations when I go out with the launch. Very bad idea. What you want to do is go out with one, maybe two versions, only the things that you know, if it doesn't work with what you're doing, you'll know whether you have a business or you don't have a business. And you can do that, but you have to be disciplined and not, look at every shiny object as a new test in a launch phase. When you're starting from the beginning, you really need to, again, do the absolute minimum with maximum effectiveness to determine whether a go, no-go is in order for that business. Those are some of the rules of thumb that I live by, and I still live by every one of those. I think also another one is, and this is really true online than ever before, is you want to go narrow before you go wide. And that's a basic, I've had so many situations where in my mastermind groups, when people are on a hot seat and they say, I want to launch a product to an audience, and they just start so broad. And it's like, why do you want to go there? They always say the riches in the niches, but it's bigger than that. Because if you can narrow it down, and in this, I'm doing a boot camp. I'm hosting a boot camp for breakthrough advertising, which is an amazing book. And we're walking people through the techniques that Gene Schwartz taught in that book. And what we're doing is getting the people in the boot camp to kind of keep asking questions about their market. So if their market, we had an example today, a lose weight offer. Well, you have to start asking questions about the market. Why do you want to lose weight? Well, I want to fit into my clothes. And then what? You keep on asking, and then what? Well, then I want to be able to look in the mirror and feel good about myself. And then what? I want to be able to go out of the house and not be embarrassed. And then what? And you go all the way down. And that's all about the transformation that Jeff Walker teaches in PLF. But that's been Jeff has admitted to me many times that when he realized that everything was about direct marketing, that's when he had the aha moment with PLF. And not to say that, he invented PLF, but he knew it was based on his knowledge of direct marketing, getting into a niche, owning a niche. I mean, he owns the niche of launches, but you can own a niche. I'd much rather own a niche than have a small piece of a huge market. And you see it on Shark Tank. When the entrepreneur goes in front of the sharks and they say, this business is an $84 billion business and all we need to do is get that much of it. Well, that's one way to go, but why not go out and see? So he's saying, so that entrepreneur is saying there's a huge desire for what we have to offer, and all we need is this small amount to have a business. And I say, why not go deep into that marketplace and carve out the specialty that only you can service, only you can supply. And that to me is, you can charge higher prices for that. You can be much more specialty in that. And you probably are going to be more fulfilled doing that than being a small piece of a big market rather than being the market. Owning a niche is, and that was big in the olden days, and it's even huger today when the internet is like, everything is out there, everything is accessible. I always say advertising opportunities are now infinite, whereas they were finite in the 80s and 90s. And so with infinite advertising opportunities, that doesn't mean that, the products and services are infinite, but you have to get to that narrow niche that you're going to own. That to me is one of the key lessons that I've learned over 40 years, and it's still true today.
I know for us, a lot of our community I would say that they self-identify as not actually liking marketing and sales as much, So they're in probably more like softer niches, like, healing or meditation and things like that. And there was a phrase in the book that kind of struck me from, you were just quoting Marty, but you said that Marty used to say we're in the business of saving lives, that as a result of what we're selling, people were saved from financial ruin and health disasters. But it sounded like he ran his company and you learned a lot from him around like kind of a mission driven business to like help people. Could you talk a little bit about that philosophy? Because it feels like it's so important.
Yeah, it really is important. But once we say we're going to save the world, without marketing, you can't. I'll give you a story. I went to France, Sebastian Knight, the French marketer.
Yeah, we're friends.
Jeff Walker's group. Yeah. So I spoke in Paris, one of my first international gigs, and I spoke in front of them. And I did the same thing in Hungary with Attila, and who's another member of Jeff Walker's mastermind. And I remember getting in front of them, and I said, I have 3 questions for you. And in France and in Hungary, these are entrepreneurship, and it exists there, but not like in the US. So now I've got a really skeptical audience. Just like in the US, the healers and the people you were talking about, they're skeptical about marketing. I had to prove to the Hungarian entrepreneurs, and that's an oxymoron,
right?
But the Hungarian, and they were there, but there aren't that many of them. But I had to prove to them that marketing is not evil.
Right.
And I opened my presentation as marketing isn't everything. It's the only thing. But that doesn't mean that I said before, that doesn't mean I'm marketing at all costs. And I'm the ugly American, right? I'm on stage. They think I'm going to figure out ways to rip off the consumer. I'm going to figure out ways to reach into customers' wallets to make more money. But the thing is, if you can be cause driven and mission. So the 3 questions I asked them were, in both cases, I said, how many of you have a mission, vision, something that you really want to share with the world? And not all of them raised their hand. So then my second question was, how many of you never raise your hand at a seminar? And so I said, now that you're free to raise your hand, how many of you, go back to the first question, how many of you have a mission or vision that you want to share with the world? And then they all raised their hand. How many of you would rather reach millions with that mission or vision, or dozens? And, obviously I was just setting them up to kind of realize that marketing is relative to who you are, to your brand, to your congruence with your passion. You can dial it up or dial it down anywhere you want. Yeah. If you're not going to partake in the marketing revolution that takes place every day in all of our lives, then I can't help you. Right. I can't help you. You're going to have a really nice life, dealing with a much smaller audience and not be as fulfilled as you can be. That doesn't mean that you have to market with all these elaborate funnels and all these elaborate ninja techniques and all the things that I hate also. I don't use a lot of stuff, but there's a way to do it. So that's what Marty taught me. Marty, I think in the book, I talk about the eulogy I gave at his funeral. And I said, it was basically, the 4 pillars of being extraordinary. And it came to me at 2 a.m. Everything comes to me at 2 a.m. Infomercials and Marty's eulogy. It was on my kitchen table the night before his funeral. And I tell the story in the book. So the 4 pillars of being extraordinary, and number 4 is Marty was always saving lives. That was always, and that's also going deep with his audience, right? Because his audience are executives who want to read his books and read the newsletters that he was publishing. But he knew what he wanted to do was a bunch of levels below that. So it's executives who wanted their lives saved by him, in a way. And so that drove the whole company. However, when Marty and I got together, the conversations that we had were always about marketing. They were always about penetrating the audience deeper. And you think that we had no mission at all sometimes. But we always knew that the base thing we were starting on was we're saving lives.
Right.
And so once you start there, then you can go anywhere you want. And again, as I said, you can dial it up or dial it down. And you know what? We dialed it up a lot at Boardroom. We had incredible copywriters who would make incredible claims in our newsletters, in our promotions for our newsletters and books, but they were all based on fact. They were all based on what was in the book. It was all, First Amendment, we pushed the envelope. And the reason why we pushed the envelope is that if we didn't push the envelope, fewer people would get our message, fewer people would buy our books, and we'd save fewer lives. And that's the connection between anybody who, in your audience, Richard, who is, hate. And I think you started this question 18 hours ago because I go on a roll here and I go off on tangents.
No, it's been great.
No, but it was sort of like you started it with, they don't like marketing.
Yeah.
You don't have to like marketing. But I will say this, and this is really important in terms of copy and messaging and marketing, that if you're the entrepreneur with the mission, with the passion that you want to change the world, you don't have to do it, but you have to share it with people who can put it in the context that you'll be comfortable with. And what I mean by that is that you don't want to write the copy, but you need a copywriter that can interview you and get everything out of your brain that you believe in this product. And then the copywriter turns it into poetry and puts it into a sales message. And then you decide whether it's too salesy or not too salesy. That's not liking marketing or not liking marketing. That's getting a message that you're comfortable with that's from your own words.
Yeah.
And the story I tell in Overdeliver was that when Marty Edelston, the founder of Boardroom, the first newsletter was Boardroom Reports in 1972, and he wanted to write the initial promotion for it. He hired Gene Schwartz, great copywriter.
Yeah.
And Gene Schwartz interviewed Marty for 2 or 3 days about everything that Marty believed that Boardroom Reports would do. And then Gene wrote this amazing package. The lead headline was 300 business magazines in 30 minutes and get the guts of each. That was the big headline. Launched the company, launched the newsletter, launched an iconic publishing company with that headline. And we were congratulating Gene on writing an amazing package. That was so brilliant, Gene. And he said, I didn't write it. Marty wrote it. Because I interviewed him for 3 days. I got everything that I needed to write that headline and the 12-page letter and everything about this newsletter, because this newsletter was his life's work. This is what he had worked for his life up until then to launch.
Right.
And you can put any product on that. It was a business newsletter it was a consumer side of the businessman's newsletter. That was the premise. But any of your people that you work with, you can fill in the blank. I do yoga, I do meditation, whatever. But whatever it is, the mission's in your head, the vision's in your head. If you don't like marketing, you still got to do it. And you got to find the people that you're aligned with that can do it congruently the way you want it represented in the marketplace. And that is so doable. And I think it's actually necessary to be completely fulfilled doing what you want to do.
Yeah, well, it's also a sacred kind of responsibility. If you're given a gift of some kind, sometimes I say if you have medicine that can help people and you hold it back, and I know in that section of the book, it was kind of music to my ears because a lot of time we do interviews and I tell people I don't write the copy. I just ask really good questions and then I kind of listen for the right things.
Exactly.
But I think Gene Schwartz had that quote in your book that says copy's not written, copy's assembled, which I thought was brilliant,
Yeah, that has a bunch of dimensions to it too.
Right.
The one dimension I love of that is that Gene Schwartz would write a promotion for a health book for us. So like I give him a 500-page health book of all the stuff that came out of our greatest hits from our newsletters.
Yep.
I'd say, Gene, write a package for this. And his first reaction was, before he even opened the book, he says, well, I got to ask you, what's not in the book? And the reason why he asked that is that he assumed that there's good stuff to write about in the book that he would pull fascinations from. And fascination writing is an art in copywriting where they're bullet points from it's like Jeopardy. It's like you have the answer in the book and you're writing the question. And Gene was a master at that, as are many copywriters back then and today.
Yeah.
Fascination writing and showing page numbers where the answer was a technique that was used by many. But the idea of asking what's not in the book was a way to go deeper again, because the book was a general health book. Right. How do I go to the next level? And he said to me, Brian, it's probably stuff that your editors rejected because it was too controversial or too edgy. Go back to them and say, where's the stuff that's on the cutting room floor that you can now go back and do some more research on and get the answers or get some data on it, and then give that to Gene and he'll write even a more powerful fascination for those. And those always were the best fascinations in the package because they were the most edgy and the most controversial stuff. If you can't back it up, we can't use it. We're not going to lie. We're not going to make it up. But it's basically it was Gene challenging the editors and the marketers to go deeper.
Right.
Whatever you've got is good, and I'll write a package for it, but there's got to be better.
Right.
Even before he started. It's sort of like this story with the Henry Kissinger story. When Henry Kissinger would write he had a speechwriter,
right.
and the speechwriter wrote the speech for him, and he brought it to him, and Henry Kissinger said, not good enough, go back and try again. He'd go back, he'd bring it again. I'm not going to do justice to the story, but so he'd go back, and Henry said, no, not good enough, go back. And he did that 6 or 7 times. And finally, the speechwriter brought it to him, and he says, no, not good enough. And he said, Dr. Kissinger, I can't do any better. It's just, this is I've poured my guts into this. I can't do any better. And then Henry Kissinger said, okay, now I'll read it. So the idea of, pounding and relent, and that's one of the characteristics of a great copywriter, insatiable curiosity.
Yeah.
Going deeper and deeper until, and that's the training we're doing in this breakthrough advertising boot camp. So I want to lose weight, so I can. Or there's another methodology that works well, my friend Michael Fishman came up with, which is, what people will tell you, what they won't tell you, and what they can't tell you. What they will tell you is obvious. What they won't tell you is something you have to dig for. These are prospects that you're reaching. That's how you know where the desire is in the marketplace.
Right.
And what they can't tell you, if you get to that, that's the goal.
Right. It's
not the natural thing that they're gonna, because they can't tell you. They don't know they don't even realize how they're behaving.
Right.
Because they can't tell you. But if you can get to it, with really grilling them and having focus groups, or even getting people on the phone who are your core market, sending surveys, going to Amazon, looking for 1-star and 5-star reviews of books that they might read. You can find it in so many ways. We have a whole list of ways to find that, what they will tell you, what they won't tell you, what they can tell you. If you can get to what they can tell you, you'll have the best sales letter of all time.
That's brilliant, Brian. While many people talk about over-delivery and even focus on the dangers of over-delivery, can you tell us a little bit more about why you made this the name of your book, and kind of just give us a summary of what it means to over-deliver, and is there a positive and negative side to that?
Yeah. So one of the reasons why is that over-deliver is not a word.
Right.
It's usually 2 words or hyphenated. So I figured I could own the word. I can't trademark it, but I figure I could own the word. That was one thing. Because again, Dan Sullivan, the best coach for entrepreneurs in the world, always says, if you name the game, you own the game.
Right.
And so I named the game, even though I didn't invent anything, but I didn't invent over-delivery either. But the downsides of over-delivery are, obvious, in that if you over-deliver and then you over-deliver some more and over-deliver some more, at some point, whether it's perceived or real, the customer, prospect, person you're dealing with is going to say, well, you gave me that so much before and you gave me less now, and then they're disappointed and then they leave you. My counter to that is I'd much rather be on the side of always over-delivering. And if I'm only going to under-deliver from that ultimate over-deliver, either by an omission of something, but not in an active way.
Right.
And if they're going to hold that against me, I don't want them in my universe anyway.
Right.
So that's how I negate that. But it is a danger, because it's always, what are you doing for me lately?
Right.
And so you always have to over-deliver. I have it in my mastermind group. So I was over-delivering during the pandemic, in that I was like, we were doing some virtual meetings instead of live meetings. And I gave them like extra meetings, because the virtual were just as good in terms of the guest speakers and all that. But I extended out their membership to really forward pace the renewal, because I'm looking at the renewal.
Right.
And so if I try to like squeeze it in and say, so I was over-delivering in my Titans Accelerator group, of which you're a member. I remember that I launched it in late 2019. So I didn't predict the pandemic, but it was very fortuitous, because it's a virtual mastermind on Zoom. And then in January, I launched it. January of 2020, I launched it. with one live call a month with me and hot seats and whatever. And then March came around, we're all home for the next, 12 months or 20 months or whatever. And so then I made it weekly calls. That's an obvious overdeliver.
Right.
Then when I pulled back later on, I went to like minimum of 2 calls a month. So the new offering was more than the original offering. And sometimes I have 4 calls a month. So I kind of worked it. So you can adjust your over delivery to fit your lifestyle, to fit what you do. But you always have to have a mindset that you're always going to do. And the other concept that's in this is 100-0, which is in my book. The idea of that you're always going to give 100% to every relationship, every interaction with no expectation of a return.
Right.
And by doing that, you're not keeping score. You're not figuring out, because the idea of reciprocation in the online world is not my definition of reciprocation.
Right.
In the online world is like you both mail for each other, and I got 60 leads and you got 30 leads. You got to mail again, so I get 30 more leads.
Yep.
That's not the way it works in reciprocation, in my opinion. Reciprocation is the way Cialdini defines it, which is you, then me, then you, then me, and be the first to give service and concessions. And so as long as you're the first and you go in at 100-0, that will serve you better over the long haul. Yep. And it's why Overdeliver was titled Building a Business for a Lifetime, Playing the Long Game. I'm not playing a short game.
Yeah.
So I think the
principle
positives outweigh the negatives of the term and of the concept, I think, in a big way.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant title. I love that concept of 100-0 too. It's really powerful. I got
that from Landmark Forum, I believe, which is the reincarnation of Est.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you also mentioned the book Give and Take in there as well. And I thought that was interesting that it's like 20% of the people are givers, 20-ish% are takers, and then 60% are exchangers.
Matchers.
Matchers, yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. And the fact that the givers had both the highest success rate and the highest failure rate, So.
Right. And then it's how you give.
Right.
And that's where the dangers of overdelivery come in. That's the nuance of overdelivery and giving. There's another chapter in that book. Adam Grant's brilliant. There's another chapter in that book. I think it's called Champ or Chump. And it's about when you give too much and you overdeliver with it's sort of like, and a lot of the people in your world are guilty of this, not in a bad way.
Yeah.
But, they don't want to ask for money. They don't want to ask for the sale. They don't. I mean, I run that risk too. I get these because I want to engage with my audience. I don't care about the open rate of my emails. I care about the engagement rate. So when someone sends me a long email asking me for advice, it's hard for me to say, I get $2,000 an hour for consulting.
Yeah.
I can't do that for free.
Right.
And yet I give them a piece of an answer.
Right.
Because they probably can't afford me. And that's the danger. That's where, but then you have people like Dan Kennedy who have always put a gate around themselves, and you have to pay to play.
Right.
Which is a fine model.
Right.
A fine model. It just that model doesn't work for me, and I get myself in trouble by over-delivering to people who are needy. They are not just needy, but they don't understand what it is to not just pick my brain, but they're trying to pick my pocket. And I wrote a blog post about that.
But recently. I mean, I think you put in 40 years of over giving, and like you did a copywriting conference a few years back, and you probably just sent an email or text or picked up the phone, and you probably had 25 of the top copywriters in the world and had a sold out event with a few emails because everybody wants to give back to you and everybody wants to support you because they're a fan, Yeah.
And the key in that is that you can't, when you develop this over time, the idea of over-delivering and 100-0 is that you hopefully will never, when you get to a certain point, you'll never, I call it, you'll never make an ask from nowhere.
Right.
Anytime you ask, because I don't ask a lot of favors of people,
right.
But when you ask something of someone, it's never from nowhere. It's always from a place of giving and heart and contribution. And you're not looking for a quid pro quo ever.
Right.
But you have to ask once in a while for favors. Like with my mastermind group, if I ask someone to speak, it's good for them too. Like you ask people to be on your podcast.
Yeah.
But I never have to pay for them. I never have to twist their arm if I developed a deep relationship with them. But if it's an ask from somebody said to me, you should get X to speak at your mastermind. It was a well-known person.
Right.
And I said, you know what? That is going to be someone that I know fairly well, but I don't think I know deeply enough. And to me, that will feel like an ask from nowhere or an ask from somewhere not deep enough. But I want my asks to be so powerful that they're saying yes before I even ask the question.
Right.
And that's where you want to be in life. And it's not because you want to get all the favors later on.
Well, that's probably the same feeling you want to have when you put any kind of offer in the market, like that people are just waiting for you to offer something so that they can buy it, or they can buy it. It's
exactly.
They have that pre-desire. Well, this has been an incredible call. And thank you so much, Brian, for sharing your wisdom.
I wasn't too tangential. I'm not the best podcast guest because my brain works in a variety of ways and I end up off on tangents. I hope I stayed, I definitely was conscious. So that's good. But I hope that,
well, I mean, I think that you can go deep and it's unusual that you can find that somebody that has depth and breadth and you have both.
Thank you.
Backed by years of experience and just an amazing, huge heart and wanting to serve people. So,
thank you. And that's why I came. I go on most podcasts when I'm asked, but some I go on more enthusiastically.
Right.
And this one's one of those because that's where you guys come from. And so I'm looking for people in my life that are consistent with the same values, and you guys are right up there. So I appreciate you.
That's all we ask. Okay.
Yeah. And if you're not on Brian's list, I'd highly recommend it. You can go to briankurtz.net and we'll post the show notes below here and the link. And his book, Overdeliver, really over-delivers. And I'll just mention that as part of the book, I think it's $27. You can go to overdeliverbook.com and you can get the deal there. I think it's $27, but it comes with, I think, 11 bonuses. And
the bonuses are worth way more than the book.
Yeah, it's like keynotes from Jay Abrams and Swipe Files and Dan Kennedy. And I asked Brian right before the call, if you see the page of bonuses, you'll just be blown away. But it's like, dozens of hours of really powerful marketing material. And then the book itself is just a gem. So I highly recommend the book. So again, briankurtz.net or overdeliverbook.com.
Yeah, I think when you title a book Overdeliver, even though it's not a word, you have to overdeliver on the bonuses. So, and I know I did. And the other piece of that is that going back to what I started with my, having a stroke and going through that process, that I realized when I was lying in the hospital bed when I had survived, I thought about what was my footprint, not legacy, but what would have been I don't like the word legacy because that assumes you're dead. But what is my living legacy or what is my footprint? And I realized that it's actually that site, overdeliverbook.com.
Oh, wow.
Because that site honors all of my mentors. They honor me because I have a lot of testimonials from them, but also Jay Abraham and Dan Kennedy and Perry Marshall and all the Gary Bensavenga, Gene Schwartz, they're all represented on there. And that, to me, as long as the internet doesn't go down and that URL is renewed by someone else,
right,
when I'm dead, that's going to live on. My mentors live on, and it's in the spirit of people are only going to live on if they're remembered. And so, having even people like Gordon Grossman and Dick Benson in there, who are two of my key mentors early in my career, they're going to be forgotten, if we don't keep remembering them. And that's the theme of the movie Coco, by the way, which one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's all about remembrance, keeps people alive.
Right. Yeah. Well, the last couple of years, I've seen some people leave even in our field. So it's always a wake up call, that you got to get your work out there and give your gifts to the world and serve others. Because that's one of the big reasons we're here,
Yes. Well said.
Well, thanks so much again, Brian, for being on the show. For all the listeners, you can get the show notes and summaries and quotes on consciousmarketer.com and just go to /podcast. You can find the episode there. Thanks for everybody for tuning in today, and head on over to Apple, iTunes, and Spotify. And if you can leave us a review if you like this episode, that really helps us get our word out into the world. We really appreciate you being here. We don't run ads, so that's the one ask that we make if you got something out of this podcast. So thanks, everybody. Thanks again, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kylie.
Thanks, Brian.